Alright everybody, so welcome to another episode of Bonsai's Forever. Alright, so today in this episode we're going to be working on this Juniperus virginii that I wired up this winter. And I was telling you that I wanted to wire it up during the winter so that all the branches that I wired out would be still growing outwards when I took the wire off, instead of everything growing upwards, because these typically will start to grow upwards, because all the ends of the branches want to be the top of the tree. And I told you guys this in a couple other videos with the virginii. And so far, it looks like everything is growing in a direction that is going to be usable. So the next step here is going to be to take the wire off, because some places it is starting to dig in, I can see, and some places it's not. But where it's not, that'll be okay that it's not. I'm still going to take the wire off because I'm going to take it all off at the same time. All right, Harley, you got to go, bud. Nope, you got to go. Go, sit. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and take the wire off then, and we'll get to it. All right, bud. So I'm going to start, I think, at the top of the tree to take the wire off here. I'm gonna try and unwrap some of it. I don't think I want to unwrap all of it, because the fact that it did break this branch. So I'm gonna cut some of it off here. It does have quite a bit of back budding from the pruning that I did, which is really awesome. It doesn't have a whole lot of old wood back budding, but it actually does have some. So that's very interesting, because I was led to believe that these don't back bud on old wood. So I guess they might. I guess it depends on when in the season you trim it back. So I think that I'm going to start trimming them back in the winter, and then looking at them in the spring to see what needs maintained, but also doing most of my trimming during the wintertime, I think, because it seems to create backbudding on the old wood. Now, of course, this is one of those times where I'm telling you what I'm doing. I don't know this for sure. This is going to be something that we're going to have to figure out over the next couple of years, because obviously you can't just make it winter and then winter again. So it's going to be a while, but we will figure this out over time. I am glad this branch stayed where it was supposed to. Alright, so that piece is off. So these pieces right here and here are actually new looking growth from the spring. And this branch, it had a couple of pieces of growth right here at the end, and then this all looks like it's new growth. Wow, this is really actually pretty cool. This is new, so This is awesome. I'm really excited about this. It's really fun when you start figuring out new things about your trees and how they grow, because then you can start implementing that later on and making your trees much better and much faster, because you're not messing it up, or you're not slowing it down by trimming it the wrong time of year or something like that. So this is really nice to figure out. I don't know if I've told you this, but I've only been working on the Junipers virginii for about 3 years now. So this is only my third attempt, really, at figuring out when to trim these. So yeah, that's really exciting. So I wired up this piece of deadwood just to give it some shape, and it actually held, which is really nice. All right, so I'm looking it over to see where all the wire is at. Excuse me, so that I don't forget anything. So forgetting wire on your trees, that's not a very good thing. That's something that could later on damage the tree. So this has got some wire scar. right along here. Which isn't going to be a big deal. These things do shed their bark like any other juniper. So that'll go away over time. All right, so this is some really thick wire. So I am going to cut this. I don't want to take the chance of damaging anything by taking the wire off. It is windy today. It's been windy for the last couple of days. So hopefully you guys can hear me. When I edit the video, I'll probably just turn up the volume a little bit so you guys can hear. I would wait to do this tree on a day that wasn't windy, but that's what time of season we're in, and this tree needs this work before it starts getting worse, because the wire is definitely digging in more than I actually saw when I was looking at it earlier. So if I didn't do this now, it would be too late. It'd be too late to repot it, which I'm going to repot it today. And the wire would dig in a lot more than I wanted it to. So we're going to take care of it today. It is looking good. It looks like the branches that I wired stayed, which is the other thing I was wondering about with wiring it during the wintertime. Or I think I actually, now I'm trying to remember. I don't remember if I wired it during the winter or during the fall. I do know that I wired it after it went into dormancy. So after the tree stopped growing or slowed down on its growing, that's when I wired it. I have noticed that there is not a whole lot of videos on the eastern red cedar. I am really interested to see how long these branches actually stay in the shape that they're in. The ones that I wired originally when I first caught this tree, first dug it up, um, those branches are pretty much still where I put them. So I think that the larger of the um, secondary branches should stay, at least should stay pretty close to where I had wired them out to. I think a lot of the new growth, a lot of the new stuff, I'm definitely going to have to wire that stuff out again. But I think a lot of the secondary branches are going to be fine though. But I think a lot of times that's the case. You know, you're going to wire out the primaries, then you're going to wire out the secondaries, and then you're going to start wiring out the tertiaries. And then at that point, the majority of the wiring is pretty much done. There's a chance that you'll have to wire out some stuff like at the tips of the branches and stuff like that later on. But a lot of times by the time you've got the secondary branches wired out, there's not a whole lot more wiring to do on the tree. Now, of course, that's not completely across the board where you're never going to wire a tree that you've wired the tertiary branch or the secondary branches, but or once you've wired the tertiary branches, wow, I'm trying to unwire and think of what I'm trying to say here. So once you've wired the tertiary branches, a lot of times you're not going to have to go back and rewire the tertiary branches on most trees. Now this is something obviously that we're learning now, so we'll find out next year whether we're going to have to come back in, or well, this winter, I guess. Dude, you're like all up in the middle of the video. Yeah, you're like all up in the middle of the video. Hi. Yes, I know. All right. Sit. 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 There you go. Stay. We're not. So far, looking at this right now is actually a pretty good time to be working on it. This wire's digging in just enough to let you know that the tree is grown since you put the wire on it, which starts growing in springtime. So it's looking good. So I was talking to of my friends not too long ago about wiring. He's new to bonsai, and we were discussing right and wrong ways of wiring your trees. And as I'm unwiring this, I'm looking at how I have to cut the wire to get the wire to come off the branches. And some of them, I cut the wire and it just comes off the branch, and some of it I have to like open the wire out. And I think that could have some play on whether I wired it correctly or incorrectly. And saying incorrectly in this instance, it doesn't necessarily mean that the branch isn't going to hold or that the tree isn't going to respond like you're wanting it to with the wire. Because basically the wire is just there to put a shape to the branch and to not kill the branch. So what I think when I'm thinking correctly or incorrectly, I'm thinking, am I going to be able to get the wire off the branch? And is the wire going to hold the branch where I want it? So in thinking of, the correct or incorrect, I think that's where one of the aspects of wiring, you should think about that, whether it's going to hold the branch, whether you're going to be able to get the wire off the branch. Because a lot of times when beginners are thinking about, am I wiring this correctly, am I wiring this incorrectly, they're thinking about what the tree looks like with the wire on the tree, as far as what I've heard from a lot of people. But that's not really the biggest concern when I'm wiring a tree. My concern when I'm wiring a tree is not breaking things that I don't want to break, not taking off new foliage that I don't want to take off, and then being able to take the wire off, doing the same thing, not breaking new branches and not damaging the bark while I'm taking it off. So I think that when we think about, am I wiring this correctly or incorrectly, I think those are the things that I would say to a beginner. Make sure that the wire is on there to where it's going to be effective and to where you're going to be able to take it off without making the tree worse than before you put the wire on it. Then of course there is definitely ways putting the wire on more effectively that is going to check all those boxes, because obviously if you put the wire on correctly, then you're not going to hurt the tree, you're not going to damage new foliage, you're not going to rip the bark off when you're taking it off and all that kind of stuff. So I think there is a right and wrong way, but I think that as you're learning and as you're developing your wiring skills, I think that those several aspects that I just mentioned, the making sure that the wire is in a safe place where it's not going to damage new branches, where you're not you're not damaging the bark when you're putting it on, you're not damaging the foliage when you're putting it on, that kind of stuff. I think that's the kind of stuff that you should be most concerned about as you're learning how to wire a branch up. Then everything else will come with practice and seeing what worked this year, what didn't work, and you'll be able to figure it out. Alright, so I think that's all the wire. Yeah, that looks like all the wire. So now the tree is all jiggly. Alright, so yeah, that's all the wire. Got these two pieces. All right, I'm gonna go grab the pot. Okay, so I've got a couple of options here. I've got a training pot. This is a 14-inch from here to here training pot. And then I've got a non-glazed ceramic pot. I think this is just a production pot. I don't know if it's handmade or if this is cast. I'm not sure how they do these, but it's not a bad looking pot. I mean, it's got a good sound to it. So it's good clay. It's been fired well. Nice looking pot, kind of a rounded cornered square pot or rectangular pot. And I think it's right about 14 inches as well. So it's about the same size as the other pot. And then I've got this ginormous training pot. It's in millimeters, of course. So it's 423 millimeters by 335 millimeters by 102 millimeters deep. It's dirty because it's been sitting in the shed for a little while. But I'm not sure which one I want to use yet. I think I'm going to take this one out of the pot. I'm going to clean up the roots. I'm going to take the soil off of it, and then we'll see which pot it's going to fit into, because I want to keep as many of the feeder roots and good looking roots as possible. And this has been in this container since I dug it up. I think it's been 3 years, something like that. It's been quite a while. So we're going to put it in one of these pots, but let me grab a bucket to collect the soil, or do I want to do that? I don't think I'm going to do that. I think I'm just going to put the soil on the ground here. I think a majority of this soil is actually just potting soil and sand. So we'll see what it looks like. And it rained like crazy the other day, so everything is sopping wet. So yeah, this looks pretty good. A lot of the roots on the edges here are the red color that you're looking for, the reddish brown color that you're looking for. And I'm not like digging right into this because I wanted to see if the ants are still in here. There was a really nice sized ant colony in here a couple of weeks ago. That was kind of part of the reason why I put it off, not doing it a couple of weeks ago, because of the ants. And it looks like they're pretty much out of there. So I'm gonna go ahead and just use the hose. Now that I'm looking at this soil, I kind of want to save it, but I'm not going to. Alright, you guys, so trying to wash all that stuff out, it's obviously a lot more than I need, so I'm going to cut some of it off. let's see what we can do with this. This is just a typical garden rake. I am going to be careful not to rip too much of this. Although some of this, it's not going to be that big a deal. And also I'm going to try not to damage the larger roots. So I'm going to try and find the Yamadori, which means the base of the tree. So all the roots that I'm ripping at the top here are roots that I'm going to be taking off anyway. Because I'm looking for those roots. And I think I've said this in another video, that out here in Florida, you don't typically see the roots of the juniper that I've seen so far. I haven't really gone deep in the woods out here looking at junipers. I've gone out there, but not looking to see if you can see the Yamadori on the junipers. So I could be wrong, but most of the time I haven't seen them. But I kind of want to show a little bit of the root flare on this, because it is pretty decent. So I know I said that I'm going to try not to rip too many of these roots, but it's got a lot of roots. I don't think I'm going to be hurting for health of this tree here. So I'm going to try and comb them out as good as I can. And so far it looks like all of these roots are pretty healthy from what I can see. And the more I dig into this, the more I wonder what kind of soil I actually used. It might have been dry sweep instead of potting soil. Tree's actually pretty heavy. Alright, so I got the Yamadori opened up. This side, there's not a whole lot going on. This guy's going the wrong direction. I've got a couple of small ones, but I've got some really nice stuff over here. I'm going to try and see what I can do with this side, leaving pretty much any larger roots that I have over here to grow on this side. And I'm gonna cut this one off. Okay, everybody, welcome back. Y'all don't know, but camera's battery died and I went and had some lunch. So we are back. I'm not exactly sure where it cut off, but I did take off this root that was going across this other very large root right here. So now I think I'm ready to do a little bit of light root pruning, smaller roots, to get rid of some of the roots that I damaged in cleaning up the roots. And then we're going to decide which pot that we're going to use. So I'm going to go through and just clip some of these back. I don't necessarily want to get rid of all of this here. I just want to clip back the damaged parts so that we don't have damaged roots in the pot right now. I really want everything in here to be good and healthy and growing so that we have more time in between repottings and stuff like that. So I'm also going to go through and see if there's any roots that are crossing over other roots or sticking straight up, that kind of stuff as well. Taking off some of the roots on the top here so that when we do plant this, all the roots will be below the surface of the soil, except for the very large primary roots. So when you're doing like the first initial repot of a tree that's a Yamadori, which is what this is. If you don't know what Yamadori is a tree that was collected from the wild. You can collect stuff from your yard. You can collect it from the forest, as long as obviously where you're collecting it, it's legal to collect trees. And this tree does not want to stand up with the root structure that I have, so it's kind of hard to place it to where I can put it down and trim some of these roots back. I want all the roots to be flaring outwards. It's called a radial root pattern, or radial roots. You know, you want your roots to be all going outwards to the outside of the pot. Roots that are going directly in towards the tree, that's not helpful for the root flare and for the nabori of the tree. It's also more stable in the pot when you have all the roots going in an outward direction. You don't want all your roots to be going all in one direction towards one side of the pot, because then the tree just doesn't stand up as well or as easily. It's not really complicated to get this to happen. I mean, it's kind of a natural thing that trees want to do, so they kind of just grow their roots in a radial pattern. The part that keeps it from doing that is by putting it into a container. So you put it in a container and it's not centered while you're growing it out from digging it up. Obviously with bonsai there's a putting it off to one side or the other, the front, back, whatever, to create aesthetics for the tree once the tree is grown. But when you're growing out a Yamadori, you want to place it in the center of the pot and at a depth that the roots can grow in a downward and out. So using a pot that is much bigger than the pot that you want to put it in later on, it actually helps, because then you have roots that go outwards towards the edge of the pot that you're putting it in, rather than going out and then straight down, kind of like this one did. But I think this was like that before I put it in the pot, because that's a very large root. So I'm pretty sure that did that before I put it in the pot, which is fine, because I think even the smaller of the plastic pots, I think I can fit this in here. Obviously a little bit of root pruning is still necessary, but when it will fit into a smaller pot here. Now the question is, do I want the tree straight up? Do I want it kind of leaning? Do I want it leaning the other way, one side or the other? You know, what direction do I want this tree to be going in? And here in Florida, where I got this tree from, the red cedars, the eastern red cedar, Junipers virginia, they typically grow straight up. I mean, their trunks are really, really straight. Eventually, the bark and the branches and all that stuff get pretty gnarly and really cool looking, but the trunk is usually pretty straight. And I want this tree to represent what I see in nature here where I live. So I'm going to plant this in an upright position, kind of like this. Now, eventually, these branches are going to be shortened. I've been talking about this for a while, since I started doing the Virginias, that they grow really, really long branches to start off with, and you have to bring them in. If I got a tree that was already relatively compact, I could keep it compact. But this was kind of a larger tree when I collected it, so now I have to bring in all the branches and shorten them. And that has to be done over time, because like I said in other videos, it's really hard to get some of the back budding and the interior growth, which this has got quite a bit of new interior growth. And I was mentioning this earlier, that the time of year that I pruned it, I think that's when I'm going to start pruning these on a regular basis and from here on out, because I've got a lot more back budding now than if I pruned this in the spring and then let it grow. It doesn't typically react like this. So from here on out, I'm going to be pruning in the winter, or the late fall. So I'm going to shorten some of these longer feeder roots here. Shorten them up to where they fit in the pot. And I don't know if I've told you guys this before, but these guys do grow roots pretty rapidly. It is a juniper, so sometimes junipers take a little while to grow roots, but these seem to grow roots a little bit quicker, and they can tolerate a lot more water than some junipers can, and they can also tolerate a lot less water than some of the junipers can. So very easy species to work with, and it kind of baffles me a little bit as to why these aren't used a little bit more in bonsai. But over the next few years, I'm sure I'll figure that out, and as to why they aren't used as much and aren't sought after. Maybe it's because of the foliage, maybe it's because of their growing patterns or habits. Maybe it's just because you can find them anywhere in nature. You can be walking through a neighborhood out here south and find these just growing in people's yards. You can find saplings and seedlings all over the place too. So maybe it's because they're so prevalent. I don't know. I don't know what the reason is. If anybody out there does know what the reason is, feel free to leave a comment. So I like to read y'all's comments and find out what you guys know. Because some of what I know is because of finding out what y'all know. So right now I'm just trying to get the roots out of the root ball that aren't attached to anything. I don't want any dead roots in the pot taking up space that the soil or good roots could be taking up. And just so you guys know, since this thing was almost completely bare rooted when the camera stopped working and I was getting ready to do this part of the work, I did put it in a bucket of water. I kept the roots under the water while I had lunch so that this wouldn't dry out. If you have bigger roots like this and they dry out, like sitting out in the sun, that's pretty devastating to the roots, and I've had trees die because of that. So just be careful. Just be careful with that. And this is still, what is this, April, the early part of April. So we're still in the spring, and I think I'm still within the normal or typical repotting for junipers. Although I've told you guys this before, I've dug these up and potted them up in the fall and later on in the season as well. So, or later on in the summer, that kind of stuff too. The only thing is when you do that, if you're living in a place that you can just go dig them up, and you're digging them up later on in the season, just make sure you put them in the shade and don't overwater them, because right when you repot them, you don't need to overwater it because that doesn't help the roots grow. But definitely keeping it in the shade, keeping it out of a lot of the wind is really helpful. And just protect the tree from extreme conditions while it's recovering from the being dug up and potted up. So let's see if it fits this pot, because I think I want to put it in this pot now, but I kind of think that if I put it in this pot now, it's going to dramatically slow down the growth. Although it fits really nicely, but I think it'll slow down the growth dramatically. And at this point in this tree's development, I think I want it to continue to grow somewhat rapidly so that I can get the branches brought back in. I'm thinking. Because that would be really nice, setting that on the bench like that. Let's look at the other pot here really quick. See what that looks like. It doesn't look bad. It doesn't look like it's that much bigger either. I mean, it doesn't look too big for the tree. But I don't know. I just don't know. I'm trying to think of what I want to do here. Where I want to go with this tree, and how much of a hurry I'm in, I guess, is kind of part of it. Because I'm not really in a hurry. I mean, I've been growing this tree for about 3 years now. So, and the trunk is about as big as I want it. And a lot of times you grow it in a larger pot to get the trunk to thicken up. So if the trunk's as big as I want it and I just want the foliage to be reduced, I think I can put it in the smaller pot and be okay. So I'm going to set this aside here without breaking things off. Grab some screens for the bottom of the pot here. Let's see if I have. Got all my scrap screens back here. Alright, so I'm going to put 2 small screens and wire them in. Alright, so I'm going to take a piece of wire and just wire these guys into the pot. There's no really specific way that this has to be done. This is just something I've seen a lot. You kind of put a loop at one end, and then have the wire sticking up so that it'll go through the bottom of the pot. Okay, so I'm gonna get this wire, put it in here. I'm gonna shorten this a little bit and make the loops a little bit bigger. All right, there we go. Normally I don't work with this large of trees and pots, so. All right, and then basically you just bend the wire over, holds the screen in the pot. Really no need to make it any more complicated than it already is, right? So all we're trying to do is keep the soil in the pot with the screen. So, I mean, the tidiness or whatever you want to say about your screen, it's not really a big deal. All right, so got that in there. Now I'm going to take a couple of scoops of the larger bonsai soil that I have. It's really more gravel than bonsai soil. I'm going to put some across the bottom here for drainage. That also keeps the soil from going out the holes that the wire that holds the tree in goes through. And I think I'm going to wire this tree in the pot. I'm going to use a little bit larger wire this time. And this is some just electrical wire that I've annealed. Doesn't have to be super long. Just basically has to hold the tree in the pot. Got some really little wire cutters here. All right. Alright, so I got my two wires in there. Alright, now I'm going to take some of the bonsai soil I have right here. I'm going to put some of this in the bottom of the pot. Let's see what that looks like. going to try and get all the roots in the pot facing downwards. So I don't want the roots to grow up out of the pot. I want them to grow down into the pot. I'm going to wiggle it down in there. Just like that. Now I'm going to make sure that my wire isn't impeding the roots. Then we'll make the tree stand up the direction that we want as we're getting this tightened down. I do want to be careful with the wire here on the roots. I don't want the wire to damage the roots while I'm tying it into the pot, or as it's growing into this pot, you know, with the wire on the roots. I want to make sure that I'm being really careful with that. There's ways of protecting the roots by putting something on the wire, putting something over the roots. I'm not sure that that's necessary here. This is an older tree. These roots are going to be pretty solid, and I'm not seeing that it's damaging the roots at all by putting the wire on them. You do want to make sure that the feeder roots are going around the wires so that they're continuing to stay into the pot. I don't want to tighten the wire down too much to break the wire, or like I said, I don't want to damage the roots. Alright, so now I'm going to make sure all the roots are in an orderly fashion down here in the pot. And also anything still sticking up, it's going to come off. Alright, now we're going to start filling this in. So I might fast forward through some of this because y'all have seen this a lot, and like I've told you before, this takes quite a while to get this part done. So alright, so I got it all repotted, and now we're going to go put it out in the garden and water it. Alright, so don't stand on the dirt there because there's ants in it still.
Ew.
I don't know if this is going to be big enough.
Doesn't look like it would be.
Or maybe I can just set it right here.
I thought it was supposed to be a bench.
This is supposed to be a bench. So if you want to know what the red cedar looks like on the inside, this log right here, that's red cedar. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the hose and water the tree.
Another red cedar, I think. Yeah.
So when we're watering them in right after we've repotted them, we want to be really gentle with the water. We want to be really gentle with the water, but we want to water it very, very thoroughly because we want to be really gentle with the water because the tree has just been repotted, so we don't want to wash the soil out of the pot, but we also want to make sure that all of the soil gets wet when we're watering it so that it's watered in good enough that the tree doesn't die afterwards. And if you notice where I put it is kind of in the shade. It's not exactly all shaded, but this is the shadiest spot in the garden right now. And now you can tell the water's coming out the side and it's a little bit dirty. So we're gonna water it until clear water comes out of it so that we know everything's been watered.
Looks like a cute little waterfall.
It does. I have my niece running the camera right now. She's doing a very good job.
Thank you.
And then I'm gonna water the rest of the tree a little bit right now, just to make sure that the tree is hydrated enough that it's going to survive the repot. And now after doing this work, I'm going to make sure this tree gets watered very regularly. I'm not sure if I'm going to water it twice a day, but I'm going to make sure that the soil stays evenly moist. I'm not going to make it sopping wet all the time, and I'm not going to let it dry out, because if you let it dry out, then the tree has no chance. But I think it looks really good. I think it looks really good. It's finally in a bonsai pot. Yeah, I'm pretty excited about that. All right, so thank you all for watching. I really appreciate you guys sticking in there with me. This was kind of a long project. I knew it was going to be a long project. I think this took me probably close to 4 hours with the camera and all that stuff too. But yeah, so if you haven't already, like and subscribe, and don't forget the Amazon wish list in the link in the description. It has like the potting soil that I use, some of the tools that I've used, that kind of stuff. So it's really helpful to me as well. So thanks. Have a great day.
Yeah, I can't. There goes who?